Hello again, I am Volunti. Now, last month I did a mobile phone photography shootout between the Sony Xperia Arc and the Apple iPhone 4. And you guys seem to enjoy that very much and find it very, very useful. So I thought now that Samsung have lent me a Samsung Galaxy S2 to play around with for a while and figured I'd do another iPhone photography shootout mobile camera thingy test shoot comparison. What's the name? Now, before I get another batch of messages asking why I'm comparing everything to the iPhone 4, why don't I compare it to the Nokia N8 or whatever phone that happens to be that commenter's particular favourite they think is the best in the world because they spent their money on it. Point of reference, because everybody knows about the iPhone 4. If you don't have one yourself, you might have had one, or you know someone who has one, you know how it performs. So it makes it very, very easy to draw a direct point of comparison to another phone when you've got a kind of de facto standard sitting there that you're very familiar with. So that tedious and likely very pointless fanboy prophylactic pre-warning aside, let's find out how the 8 megapixel shooter on the Galaxy S2 does against the iPhone 4, shall we? Alrighty, first off the bat we can see that both the iPhone 4 and the Galaxy S2 share a very similar focal length, with the field of view being near enough to identical that makes no difference whatsoever. But what is also immediately apparent to most of us with working eyeballs is that, just like with the Sony Ericsson Xperia Arc, the Android device sucks in a much more accurate white balance while the iPhone has a tendency to lean towards a slightly warmer colour palette. The Samsung is also slightly less saturated and contrasty, which, if you are like me and prefer to adjust those elements yourself in editing software, is actually a good thing because it gives you more latitude for control. But if you shoot from the hip and immediately share and upload your shots without touch-up, you may prefer the built-in richer aesthetic of the iPhone. On the image detail front, it's a close call. At first glance, the iPhone does seem to have the edge though, but it's mostly thanks to the extra contrast boost it applies, which helps make the finer detail pop. But don't be fooled. Keep in mind that the Samsung shoots at 8 megapixels while the iPhone 4 caps out at 5. And while I always say more magic megapixels doesn't automatically make things better, as I'll show you in a moment, there is significantly more image information in the Samsung's image. When it comes to clarity, it's still a photo finish for both cameras. Ha ha! Horse racing photo pun. Both churn out a nice crisp image that stays sharp to the edge of frame with no significant softening at the corners, and in decent lighting both will give you a bright, noise-free image that is well exposed, and both are on par when it comes to respecting gentle graduation of colour and tone. The Samsung is very well behaved. I never ran into any situation where it spazzed out or couldn't deduce the correct exposure or failed to lock the focus where I wanted it. You can rely on it to take the shot you think you're taking. Which sounds like a no-brainer, but trust me on this, not all cameras are anywhere near as well behaved. Even when I started deliberately trying to shoot scenes that will make most small sensor cameras trip up a bit, the Galaxy S2 put on a smirk face and just asked me, what else you got? A good example is this shot. The iPhone kinda pooped itself a little bit and got confused and overexposed the clouds, nuking all detail, while the Samsung, unfussed, got it exactly right. Now, to be fair, had I let the iPhone 4 shoot in its built-in HDR mode, this issue could be corrected, but this is a test of the neutral performance of the camera, not post-processing software trickery. The point is, the Samsung got it right with one shot, the first time. But all that said, sometimes I could trip up the exposure of the Samsung, like here. Sure, both the iPhone and the Galaxy overexposed the flowers, but the iPhone got it closer to correct, so partial marks on this one, I guess. The Galaxy S2 also has a dedicated macro focus mode for those super close-up shots, while the iPhone just kind of figures out you want to do macro all on its own, without the need to dive into a couple levels of option menus, which is far more convenient, but performance scores higher than convenience in my book, so let's take a look. Once more, the iPhone's tendency to boost contrast makes the detail in the macro shots pop a bit more, but look at all that buttery, smooth, defocused bokeh in the background. It's much more aesthetically pleasant on the Samsung than it is on the iPhone to my eye. For macro shots, the Samsung wins hands down, no question. This is a telling shot though. This carousel was in motion, and you can easily see that the Samsung had to use a slightly slower shutter speed to get the exposure right, and that caused a very slight motion blur which softened all the details. This shot also shows the slight shutter lag on the Samsung. God damn it, there was a lot of shishes in that sentence. I held both phones up in each hand and pressed the shutter on each at the exact same moment, and the time between pressing the button, the camera acquiring focus lock, and the shot actually being recorded is very evident in this shot. The Galaxy's shutter isn't exactly slow. It's certainly faster than many other camera-equipped Android devices I've used, and the shutter lag is easy enough to account for once you've gotten used to it, but the iPhone is noticeably faster, and that can make the difference between catching a moment and missing it. So, back to that difference in detail and resolution I mentioned a moment ago. Let's take a look at a few pics and swap over to actual size with a 100% crop. Here, it's easy to see that the Samsung does indeed suck in much more detail. It's sharper and clearer and cleaner, and to be honest, surprisingly good for a camera phone. I've owned dedicated point-and-shoot cameras that couldn't have resolved this level of detail. All in all, much like it was with the Xperia Arc, this is a very, very close call, but on the whole, I think I'd have to give it to the Galaxy S2. The Samsung simply takes a better photo than the iPhone. And if you pull that image into even a simple photo editing app and push the contrast and saturation up just a twig, the Samsung snapped shots will pop every bit as pleasantly as the iPhone's. But wait, there's more! So, the Samsung stills are superb, but what about the video mode, I hear you ask? With the iPhone 4 capped at 720p and the Samsung capable of pushing things all the way up to 1080p, surely the videos from the Samsung Galaxy S2 are way better, right? No, wrong. Sadly, and with no small amount of disappointment, I found that the videos from the Samsung couldn't live up to the promise that the stills offered. They were soft, undefined, rubbish. There was no sharp detail, there were buckets of motion blur, the sound was thin and tinny. There was not only no manual control over the focus point, and sin of all heinous sins, the mandatory autofocus would randomly hunt back and forth or simply refuse to focus for several seconds altogether, for no good reason at all, leaving me with largely unusable footage. You can't rely on the video mode. The Samsung Galaxy S2 may give the iPhone 4 a nice solid Charlie horse when it comes to picking up pretty photographs, but the iPhone crams a knife in the thorax of the Samsung when it comes to video. We already know that the Galaxy S2 has a nice lens and a damn good image sensor, so the issues with video are all about the software, so with a bit of luck, in a future update, it'll be fixed. But for right now, it's utterly useless. So, once more, a definitive which is better answer eludes me, because it all depends on where your priorities are, stills or video. Obviously for me, video is important, but for you, maybe you don't care. It's your call. Either way, I hope this video has been helpful. Thanks for watching, I'm Blunty, and I'll catch you next time.